This episode of Game Masters Hall is sponsored by The Deck of Many and Level Up Dice.
Hello, and welcome to Game Masters Hall. I'm your host forever and always, Becca Scott, and today we're going to talk about world building. When running your own campaign for your very own role-playing game, you first need to create a world for your characters to live within. Now, before I start talking about world building, I'm gonna need a guest. Who could be better than Mr. Ivan Van Norman?
Well, hello, Becca Scott.
That's amazing how you just spun into being.
It is existence in perpetuity. That was good.
Say that 10 times fast.
Perpetuity. Thanks for having me on, Becca.
Ivan, it is such a pleasure to have you on my show that I am the only host of.
Forever and always.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Don't look at the thumbnails. Ivan.
Yes.
How would you define world building?
I would say world building would be the act of creating your own unique campaign or space in a role-playing game that involves its own, well, world. You know, culture, religion, languages, topography, economy. Like
economy.
Everything. Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. Let's see, education.
Education.
The diet of the people.
One would say all of the pillars of society.
Don't go there.
I know, can't do it.
Oh, no, deep cut.
But that is pretty much, world building is basically taking all of the elements that we are interested in when we see a world that we're infatuated with and kind of diving into the little facades of it. And sometimes people do world building because they just want to be super creative and like take their own charge in the world that they're making. But I also found that it's not completely necessary when you want a role-playing game, when you want to run a game either. So
now you have run many games here at Geek and Sundry.
Yes.
How do you go about it? For example, let's take We're Alive Frontier.
Right, which wasn't my world, but we were built off of that world because Casey Wayland, the original owner of We're Alive, he was actually the world builder in that circumstances.
And that comes from a podcast primarily.
Yeah,
it started as a podcast about a zombie apocalypse.
But he established all the things we talked about in world building, like, you know, what the culture's like, you know, what areas, what stories are in what areas. Like, he basically built a perfect sandbox. That's the perfect way to put it. Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah, so world building is basically, he made all of the little pieces in the sandbox that we could place our little figures in and start playing in the space.
Sure.
You know?
And as a game master, I think there's two very basic camps of the way you can run a game.
Right.
You can do it as if it is a sandbox, have a million different options and be okay with whatever your players want to choose, or have a strict and rigid adventure you'd like them to hopefully find that you've pre-written.
Yeah, it's funny because world building is a creative exercise, right? It's literally something that you do in order to try to have a better grasp on what's going on in your game. Like, I've found that the more that you know about what's going on in your world, the better that you can react off of what your players are doing. You
right.
know?
Well, I think as a GM, it's similar to being prepared as a player.
Yeah.
If you've chosen a few core elements as your player of your worldview, your perspective, then if someone asks you a question, you immediately know how your character would answer.
Right. Because you've done that background. You've done that work.
So would you say that knowing when your world is good is when needing to present a location, you immediately think, this would be in this world.
Right. You know, and it can be a launching off point, like what you're talking about, like giving them a strict regiment, you know, to kind of like say, okay, you start off in this town and, you know, this is the plot hooks that I'm giving you, go crazy. Or it could literally be, you know, as hey, you're in a town, and what do you want to do? It's very open world, you know. I actually really like open world. I like just having the world already established enough around it that you can react whatever direction the players go. You know?
That takes a lot of experience to be comfortable with doing.
And you have to have confidence in your world building, you know, of whatever's happening.
Okay, so say I've never world built before.
Right.
Do I start with making a giant map of a continent, or do I start small?
Yeah. For me, and this is purely off of what I like to do, is I like to start really small and then kind of expand off of that. It can get super overwhelming if you if you get into big macroeconomic things right off the bat. Sometimes that's what you're comfortable with. I would say go with what feels the best for you. Like if you're super interested in economics, then like pick an economic culture that looks really good and then build off from there. Like if you're really into like topography and how geography affects culture and lifestyle, right? There's a lot of people who say that Tolkien did a lot of his work with Lord of the Rings because he was a language fanatic, and Lord of the Rings was literally an avenue for him to put all of his languages inside of, you know?
Oh, wow.
And so that's perfectly legit. He built the archetype of fantasy off of his fascination of languages.
Absolutely. But Tolkien is a really lofty example to start with.
I know, it's a very high bar to go with.
Yeah, back to basics. I'm building a world.
A town.
And even smaller, maybe just start with the tavern.
You could,
wherever your crew will begin their adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. Name it or give it who's the owner. Like, don't go too crazy. Like, you don't have to get into huge elements of it, but then then build up from there, right?
Okay, so I want to do something. I want to create a little tiny world on the fly.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay,
yeah, that sounds awesome.
A couple things that help me are thinking of all 5 senses.
Okay.
As well as I like to save the naming for last.
Okay, that's fair. That's actually a great way to do it.
Do you have an opinion on when you name something?
I sometimes like to pick a name because it gives me a hook in which to identify off of, but naming last is also totally legit. I like your 5 senses. Should we pick one?
Sure. What's the most important? I mean, sight for most humans.
Let's do something weird. Let's do something sense. Let's do smell. Okay.
A pile of dung.
Pile of dung. All right. So
I feel like we're in a junkyard.
Now we have a junkyard. So we have a junkyard, a tavern, and a junkyard. Why would people want to go to this tavern in a junkyard?
A tavern and a junkyard. Well, obviously.
That's next to it.
Obviously, Old Man Jenkins.
Old Man Jenkins.
Borrowing from other properties we like.
Sure, yeah. Maybe the food is so good, it demands that you come to this place despite the smell. Like the food is so good.
The smell has a lot to do with taste, but maybe it's just this weird combination where it heightens it.
Weird, okay.
It's like a fermented smell.
Their stew makes the junkyard smell better.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So now you have a little counterculture there. You now have a hot spot. Yeah. That's in this whatever town that we're creating that's next to a junkyard. Okay, that's a good
Are you
place
ready to
start.
name the town, or should we wait?
No, because we just have the town. So what's next to it if this junkyard is there? Then let's say if there's a lot of junkyard, then probably the people in the town are really frivolous. They throw away a lot of things, which means they have a lot of luxury. They have a big economy. So it's a big economic city.
Yes.
So,
they live inside of a virtual reality helmet, and it's just constantly rappers and everything
We're modern. That's cool. I'm down with that as well.
You know, it just following it.
So we have a high luxury town that is very frivolous with their spending, and as a result, one of the hot spots is next to a junkyard that has the best tasting, smelling food on the planet.
And that stew you mentioned.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's just it's chunky. It's got like the best broth that you just slurp right up.
Okay.
If you let it sit there too long, it becomes a solid. That's how good it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the name now because it's the town would probably be named after its very luxurious or its frivolous spending or something that would just be like a Tokyo, something like that,
Ooh.
It has to be like a San Francisco or a Tokyo or like a Beijing or something like that. So, Tampei. TNP.
Sponsored by Tampax. No.
Yeah, well, that's fun. So we just made a cute little town.
And there it is. And then from that, we just put our characters in. We think of what other NPCs would exist here.
And then we can decide what's around it that could be affected by Tanpei's situation. Yep.
Yeah. And to use more senses, what's something you hear in Tampei?
Sure. Yeah, is it on the coast?
Ooh.
Or is it in a valley?
The honking of a barge horn.
Done. That's taking the trash away. Yeah. Or bringing in the imports.
Yeah, or dumping more trash.
All of it. We're very focused on the trash. So.
I mean, it's their number one resource.
When you have a culture that's throwing away a lot of stuff, recycled materials can be valuable.
Ooh, so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a whole culture, a subculture of people that live within the junkyard.
Like a slum.
Oh yeah, but you dig deep enough in the sludge pile and you'll find whole little cave tunnels, communities living in there.
All right, you've got a Subnautica of trash going on here.
Oh yeah,
okay.
Subnautica. They worship the trash.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Tempeh.
Tempeh.
All right, so what have we got? Don't reinvent the wheel. Stick with what you know.
Spiral, if you can, or at least
Start
start
small.
small and expand.
Grow big, yeah.
Yeah, don't get overwhelmed by the details, and start with what you know.
Start with what you know.
Yeah.
Oh man, I could talk about world building with you all day, Ivan.
All day.
But real quick, we've got to check in with our boy Xander, who's talking to Emily of Level Up Dice.
Thank you so much, Becca. I'm so excited. These dice look beautiful. What do you have for me?
The question we ask ourselves a lot is why dice when we're gaming? In this era of technology, of apps,
Sure.
why still dice? Why
Yeah.
are we using these relics on our tables? So dice actually have a really interesting history. Dice have been used by humans for over 5,000 years.
Whoa.
We have evidence they may have been used even before that, but we know at least for the past 5,000 years, humans have been using dice for gambling, for gaming. Humans have been using dice to tell the future.
Oh, gosh, yes,
Soothsayers, shamans,
Amazing.
even leaders, monarchs would use dice to make huge decisions.
Right? I think that happened recently, too.
So another interesting fact is up until the Renaissance, it was actually believed that the roll of the dice was determined by the gods,
Oh,
by
sure.
divine intervention.
I know several players that still believe that.
I still believe
Yeah,
that. I
cursed
think
dice or-
exactly.
yeah.
People really attribute a lot of reverence to these dice, to these objects, and the truth is they're more than just the plastic or the stone or the metal that they're made from. They
Yeah.
are assistants to our story.
Right.
These are your assistant storytellers when you're playing the RPG of your choice. So why dice? I think we really need to give them the respect that they're due. Exactly.
It's true.
Thank you. Because these are objects that assist you and assist your GM in making the decisions that your character makes.
Yeah.
And in unveiling the story as you go through your journey.
So it makes it interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Of course.
Ivan, thank you so much for coming in to talk to me about world building.
Thank you, Becca.
And I just want to shout out a new D&D campaign setting called Humblewood.
Right, yeah.
You know all about Humblewood.
I took a look at it and I was really impressed because all the stuff that we were talking about, like all the different facets of a world that help you kind of like create a unique space, they got all that inside of it.
It's about bird folk, right?
Yeah, well, it's so the big thing is that they have what we did when we started with a town, and then they have whole races that are tied into this space, and they have it's basically like a region. So one of the things that's confusing is that a world building isn't necessarily like an entire world. It can be like a sub-region of an established place like D&D.
Yeah, it's the world of just your game, so that could be small or big.
Yeah, so they have a whole cool culture with some bird folk that are unique, that are different than like the ones that you see in the standard D&D 5e player's handbook. And
A town living in the trees.
Yes, and it's super fun. They go into very good detail about like why they're there and like what are reasons that you can have these creatures tie into it. They get all into the fluff, which is super fun.
Well, if that sounds fun to you, make sure you check it out at humblewood.net, and you can also support their Kickstarter there. Ivan, thank you so much for talking to me about world building.
Thank you for having me, Becca.
It is my great pleasure. Thanks to you guys for watching at home. And I lied, I will not be the host forever and always. For the next episode, Ivan will be hosting. Ivan, who's your guest?
I will be having Mr. B. Dave Walters joining me as we talk about either grid-based combat or storytelling. It'll be a lot of fun. Check it
That
out.
sounds excellent.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.